Real Housewives is a show about female friendship. The trips, the dinners, the birthday parties, the toast to good times. Most of what appears on your screen is warmth performed with professional skill. But if you look closely, if you pay attention to what gets said on podcasts, on social media, in hot mic moments, and in interviews where someone forgets to be careful, the truth comes through. These are 10 pairings who were never as close as they pretended. The Real Housewives franchise has always operated on a simple but effective tension. Put women who have genuine feelings about each other into close proximity, add cameras, snorts, and let the truth surface. What the show has demonstrated across 20 years and dozens of cities is that the most compelling moments are not the ones that were manufactured, but the ones where the performance of friendship cracked just long enough for something real to show through. And what shows through, more often than producers probably planned for, is that certain pairs of women on the show genuinely cannot stand each other. We are not talking about cast members who fought and recovered. We are talking about the specific dynamic where two people smile in group photos, give each other kind reunion quotes, appear to be on good terms for the cameras, and then say the actual thing when they think nobody is compiling evidence. The receipts are real, the proof is documented, and the list starts in Orange County, where the most durable fake friendships in franchise history have been produced. The first pairing is Vicki and Shannon Beater. Spent seasons presenting themselves as the anchor of a three-woman alliance that also included Tamra Judge. When Tamra exited the Tres Amigas in early 2024, both Vicki and Shannon had things to say about her publicly. That part was not hidden. What was more revealing was what Tamra disclosed about the inner workings of the alliance, while all three were still supposedly in it. Tamra told Entertainment Tonight that while she was still doing live shows with Vicki and Shannon, the two women would talk crap about each other behind each other's backs when one of them was absent. She called it a very toxic friendship. The specific phrase she used to describe what she witnessed was not that they fought occasionally or had different opinions. She said they talked about each other consistently, that the Tres Amigas format was less a genuine friendship and more a business arrangement that required proximity neither of them truly enjoyed. The proof came in April of 2024 at one of Vicki and Shannon's live shows. A fan in attendance reported that Shannon called Tamra the worst part of RHOC Season 18, and that Vicki went further, encouraging the entire audience to chant against their former close friend. She had her audience chant F Tamra. Tamra said publicly after learning about it, "I was like, we were just texting the week before. What are you doing?" Tamra added something that landed quietly, but was actually the most pointed observation, that Vicki had personally told her Shannon had a drinking problem, and that Shannon had personally told her that Vicki had said horrible things about her. Both women used their private confidences about each other as ammunition against Tamra the moment she was no longer in the room. What that tells you is not just that they disliked Tamra. It tells you that the loyalty inside the Tres Amigas was entirely directional, pointed outward at a common target, and that underneath the matching interview slots and the group selfies, Vicki and Shannon's opinion of each other was not warm. The second pairing is Kyle Richards and Dorit Kemsley, who spent years as the tight core of what Rob called its Fox Force 5. They vacationed together, celebrated each other's birthdays, and had the kind of on-camera warmth that looked genuinely real. Season 15 revealed what was underneath it. The breaking point documented across multiple episodes and after shows was Dorit's book cover reveal party. Kyle and Erica Jane skipped it without informing Dorit in advance. Kyle sent a text. Erica did not reach out at all. What made Erica's absence particularly sharp was her stated reason. Asked by a producer whether she understood that not showing up could make things worse, Erica replied on camera, "To be honest with you and everybody watching or listening, I didn't care." Dorit called the slight publicly devastating, describing how her body almost suppressed it because it was too painful. She said it was a high for her, a genuine career milestone, and that two of her closest friends chose not to show up. Dorit then alleged that Kyle and Mauricio had invited her estranged husband PK to Kyle's daughter Alexia's wedding with deliberate intent to make her uncomfortable enough that she would not attend. "They probably invited PK, so I wouldn't show up," Dorit said. "Guess what I did? I showed up. On my own. Walked in, head held high. She noted that at that wedding, Erica and PK stood near each other and acted as though she was invisible. Call called the reunion preview torture, infuriating, and sad. These are not the words people use to describe friendships they actually value. The third pairing is Gizelle Bryant and Wendy Osifo of the Real Housewives of Potomac, whose feud is one of the most thoroughly documented mutual hostilities the franchise has ever produced. It began when Gizelle entered season 6 spreading rumors that Wendy's husband Eddie was cheating, circulating this information within the cast before Wendy had any opportunity to respond. Gizelle's stated rationale, once pressed, she was simply raising a question she had heard. Wendy's response on Watch What Happens Live was precise. Let's be very clear. No one talks about relationships except for the fact that Gizelle constantly attacks our husbands. So, when you attack our husband, we return serve by saying, how can you attack us when we have no one in your life to even attack? So, that's why she is Gizelle Lax Bryant. When Mia Thornton threw a drink at Wendy in season 7, Gizelle said nothing. She did not defend her. When the incident became the centerpiece of a reunion conversation, Gizelle attempted to redirect attention by claiming that Wendy had given her daughter a dirty look at an earlier event. Wendy rejected this completely. You speaking to me? Of course. No touching. No touching. Beautiful. How amazing. Good. I just want to say hi. Yeah, no touching. Refused on camera in front of the rest of the group. By season 9, with Gizelle's longtime alliance partner Robin Dixon gone from the cast, the two women sat down to attempt a reset. The friendship they attempted to build was described by observers as suspect, the timing coinciding too neatly with both women losing their primary alliances. Wendy said on the after show that she had been in hell with Gizelle. Gizelle admitted in her own interview that their season 9 lunch was the best conversation we've ever had. If the best conversation you have ever had with someone comes after 5 years of documented hostility, that is not a friendship. That is a ceasefire built on the shared recognition that neither of you has anyone else left. The fourth pairing exists not within a single show, but across the franchise universe. Bethenny Frankel and Ramona Singer spent years occupying the same cast with a warmth that varied dramatically depending on which season you were watching. When Bethenny returned to Roni in season 7, the first thing that became clear was that Ramona had not spent the years of her absence maintaining great affection for her. Ramona accused Bethenny on camera of sleeping her way to success. Bethenny cataloged Ramona's treatment of service staff and lower-profile cast members in interviews that were neither brief nor gentle. Tamra Judge, who filmed a joint podcast with Teddy Mellencamp and had her own opinion of virtually everyone, said on air that Ramona was just kind of inherently rude and that she was very dismissive of people. Shannon Beater disclosed that for years and years, Ramona did not know her name when they interacted at events. A detail Shannon delivered flatly without dramatic embellishment, which made it more believable than if she had performed outrage around it. Ramona eventually apologized to Shannon for this. The apology itself confirms the behavior. What makes Bethenny and Ramona interesting as a pairing is that their dislike of each other was largely open. It was the source of some of the show's best moments. But both spent years in the same press circuit giving answers about each other that stopped carefully short of outright condemnation. The quotes existed on a register of, I find her behavior difficult, and I cannot always explain her choices rather than I actively dislike this person. The active dislike was visible to anyone who watched them in the same room. When Bethenny eventually addressed Ramona's conduct in the Vanity Fair racial slur scandal, her response, that she doesn't take what happens on reality TV at face value and honestly doesn't know, was the most delicately constructed non-statement of her public career from someone who has never historically been vague. The fifth pairing is Teresa Giudice and Melissa Gorga, which is almost too obvious to include on a list about secret contempt because their hostility has been about as openly performed as contempt gets. But the specific proof that makes them worth examining here is not the table flip or the stripper rumors or the wedding boycott. It is the social media record. In July 2024, Teresa posted a statement asking followers to stop engaging with hate and toxicity. Within hours, Melissa responded on Instagram stories with a post that said, "Beware of wolf in sheep's clothing," followed by the hashtags laughable and delusional. Rachel Fuda added a meme about trying to explain to toxic people why you cannot be around them. At the season 14 reunion in 2024, Teresa reportedly vowed never to speak to the Gorgas again. The show was then placed on a 2-year hold by Bravo, specifically because of how toxic the dynamic had become. Bravo's own word. When they eventually reconciled at BravoCon 2025, Melissa said it was baby steps and described the previous years as a period in which the kids across both families had essentially lost contact with each other. Teresa said she was the type that holds grudges and that it was significant she was choosing to make peace. When someone describes their own capacity for peace as notable, what they are also describing is the depth of the hostility they are choosing to suspend. The sixth pairing is Lisa Vanderpump and Kyle Richards, whose decade-long Rob friendship ended at Villa Rosa in Season 9 in what became the most quoted scene of that era. Goodbye, Kyle. So, how are we ever going to repair this situation? Get thee out of my house. When asked on Watch What Happens Live in 2024, do you regret tossing Kyle out of your house during your heated conversation? Oh no. Do you regret on a second? No, I don't regret it. I loved it. On a separate occasion in January 2024, she told a morning show host that she has no interest in reconciling with Kyle and that ship has sailed. Kyle's own account of their most recent public run-in, a restaurant encounter where the host seated them at adjacent tables, included her hiding behind a pillar when she saw Lisa before deciding to go over and say hello anyway. She was short, Kyle noted. A friendship does not produce a decade of history and then arrive at the place where one person hides from the other in a restaurant. That is not recovering from a difficult period. That is two people who have made a permanent calculation about each other. The seventh pairing is the Tres Amigas from an angle that has not been fully examined, specifically Shannon Beater and Vicki Gunvalson as a standalone duo without Tamra as the variable. When Tamra disclosed that both women talked about each other while the third was absent, she was describing a triangle in which every alliance was secretly bilateral resentment. Shannon told a reporter in January 2024 that she and Teresa don't even look at each other. She was describing her dynamic with Teresa Giudice at the time, but the same description could be applied to how Vicki and Shannon have navigated each other's company outside of the frame where the cameras catch them smiling. When the Dos Amigas tour imploded and the Tres Amigas franchise collapsed entirely, there was no warm statement from Shannon about Vicki or from Vicki about Shannon. There was primarily silence, and then both directed their energy toward commentary about Tamra. What neither acknowledged in any available interview was what Tamra said she had witnessed directly, that the two of them, alone in a room, were not actually friends. The eighth pairing is Jill Zarin and Bethenny Frankel, which revisits a relationship covered earlier in this list, but from a specific angle that deserves its own attention. Jill said on a podcast years after their falling out, "I really thought Bethenny and I were like sisters. I really miscalculated our friendship because we weren't like sisters. It was a business relationship for her." This is the kind of thing people say when they were the party who cared more. But the evidence of what actually happened suggests a more complicated picture. Jill began organizing against Bethenny within the cast. During the same period, she was publicly expressing hurt about losing their connection. She told another cast member on camera not to film with Bethenny. She used her standing as a veteran Roni cast member to isolate the woman she described as her closest friend. These are not the actions of someone grieving a lost friendship. The grief was real, the love may have been real, but the conduct was something that only makes sense if, underneath the warmth, there was always a competitive edge that the friendship had been managing rather than eliminating. The ninth pairing is Teresa Giudice and Caroline Manzo, which sits in the background of Real Housewives of New Jersey history, but carries an accusation that Teresa has maintained publicly for over a decade, that Caroline was responsible for reporting her to federal authorities, leading to the fraud conviction and prison sentence. Caroline has denied this emphatically. What they have both maintained publicly and what the show captured at length is a mutual contempt that was visible from their earliest seasons together and that was formalized into complete non-communication long before the legal drama began. Caroline described Teresa's behavior in terms that were specific and unsparing. Teresa described Caroline in ways that circled around words like betrayal and disloyalty with the precision of someone who had been rehearsing the accusation for years. What is notable is that neither woman ever found a path to even performative cordiality after their falling out. Most Real Housewives feuds cycle through at least one reunion reconciliation. This one never did. The 10th pairing is the most recent, and it involves the group dynamic that defined Rob's season 15 in its entirety, Kyle Richards and Erika Jayne. These two have shared a cast for 9 seasons, have been photographed together at events across years, and have consistently described each other in the warm language of franchise alliance. And then Erika, on camera, about skipping her friend's book party, I didn't care. Not, I was hurt and couldn't face it. Not, I needed space. I didn't care. When a production crew asked a follow-up about whether her absence would damage the friendship further, she said she understood that it might and that she didn't care about that either. This is not the language of a woman who was hurt and withdrew. This is the language of a woman who had arrived at a settled position of indifference toward someone she had called a close friend for most of a decade. The difference between sadness and indifference is the most important distinction in this franchise. And Erika Jayne's season 15 confessionals about Dorit and Kyle contained more indifference than any performance of warmth they had previously produced together. Kyle at the reunion described the experience as torture, infuriating, sad, traumatic, and long. That is not how people describe sitting across from friends who disappeared into difficult circumstances. That is how they describe sitting across from people who chose, very deliberately, I'm going to let something end. The phrase that applies to every pairing on this list is one that Tamra Judge used about the Tres Amigas and that resonates across every franchise. If you're my friend, be my friend. The show has always been about the performance of that instruction. What these 10 pairings demonstrate with considerable and documented evidence is that performing it is not the same as meaning it, and that the cameras have always been more honest about the difference than the people in front of them intended to be. A fan audience chanting against their closest friend, a book party skipped with zero regret, a restaurant hiding, a podcast admission that both women in the friendship were talking about each other the whole time. 10 pairs, all documented, all provable, all smiling in the group photos. Subscribe for more.